Hi everybody, Craig Peterson here. We're about to get started with another one of our Saturday shows, heard every Saturday morning here on these iHeartRadio broadcast channels. Yes, terrestrial radio, and I also have it out online. You can find it all at craigpeterson.com. Well, today we are going to be covering a couple articles that I think might be a bit of a surprise to you. One of them has to do with green cars. Now, if you've known me for a long time, you know that green cars aren't green. But there's a study out, we're going to talk about that. Yet another study. Remember the one that said that the Hummer H2 was actually, no, it was the H1, was actually more green than the Toyota Prius? Well, a new study out. Right here in New Hampshire, that's where I'm located, Senator Hasan, her aide stole gigabytes of high-value data. So we'll talk about that and what happens when a business, or in this case a government agency, has one of their employees go rogue. The FBI's facial recognition program is under fire. Wi-Fi. Is it bad for your health? A new study out, and a very interesting article from Tech Republic on that. If you think that by going to the cloud, your business is going to be safe, you have another thing coming to you. New research out on that. Amazon, wow, I can't believe they're doing this with books. You might have heard about this with 1984, that George Orwell book a little while ago. Well, there's a whole lot here we're going to talk about. And mental health apps, and what data are they actually sharing? So here we go with all of our news that's fit for today. So first up today, let's talk about driving your Tesla. Now, they are cool, and I had a really interesting discussion with one of my daughters. She lives in Norway right now. She's running a huge project, autonomous ships for Kongsberg, which is just a huge shipping company. They make the controls and stuff for shipping. They just bought Rolls-Royce Marine here a few months back. And I was talking to her about Teslas because electric cars get a special subsidy in Norway. Now, here in the U.S., Tesla has already reached the 200,000 car mark, and the idea behind this was that the federal government would provide extra money to help subsidize the purchase of electric cars, not just Teslas, but once they hit the 200,000 car mark, that subsidy would go away, and some of the Democrats in Congress are pretty busy right now trying to figure out how can they re-establish that deal, get that deal going again. And they may end up doing that. Well, in Norway, they have similar things where the government is subsidizing electric vehicles, and to a very large point. Because in Norway, right away, you don't have to pay the sales tax, which is 25%. Sales tax, imagine that. And it's a VAT too. So it's not just the sales tax when you buy it, but there's sales tax every time a product changes hands, from manufacturing parts through distribution, through the final retailer, and then you. So things are just crazy expensive there. They have a great free market economy. Don't get me wrong. They are not a socialist country. None of these Scandinavian countries are socialist, but they are very heavily taxed, and they do have a lot of government programs. So they were talking about getting rid of this subsidy, effectively a subsidy for electric cars. Tesla stock went down, and there's a lot of reasons it goes up and down, right? Well, here in the U.S., what's the reason everybody seems to be giving for an electric car? Why do they want these electric vehicles? What's the big deal? Why does it matter? Well, here in the U.S., they're telling us this story that while it's more green, there's less carbon that goes into the atmosphere. And it's a wonderful thing. And every Friday night, we get together, all of us electric car owners, and we lock arms and we sing Kumbaya, right? And it's all because it's green. They're just wonderful vehicles. And you know that there's obviously some mistruths to that. Let me put it that way. And in fact, it's just not true. And that's what the study's showing. In Norway, they're much more sane about this. In Norway, they're saying, hey, Yeah, these electric cars are not more green, but what we're trying to do is prevent the pollution in our environment here in Norway. So we don't want these cars to be emitting all of this nastiness and trucks and things. We just want electric vehicles. We don't care that they're made in China and Japan and that's shipped all over. We don't care about the pollution they're causing worldwide and the fact that recycling this stuff, it's hazardous, right? But what we care about is that we have clean air. Now, that to me is a legitimate argument. I think the legitimate arguments might be it's cool technology, and the other argument might well be that, the air here tends to be a little bit cleaner. Now, of course, they're dumping all of the crap that they're byproducts of making these batteries in these cars. They're dumping them in the ocean in China and into the air. It eventually gets here. All of this plastic in the ocean that's coming from these third world countries and communist countries that just don't care about it, right? So this article is absolutely fascinating, and it's saying that driving a Tesla results in more CO2 than a Mercedes diesel does. So think about that for a minute. Diesels have gotten a really bad name lately because of some cheating that was done on emissions tests. Now, I put that cheating in air quotes. You saw that, right? If you're watching this, craigpeterson.com/YouTube. You saw me do that. Well, the reason I do that is that diesels it's a different type of emission. And when the engine is cold, they run differently than when the engine is warm or when it's hot. And some of these tests that were being done by our EPA and the European Union don't really give the diesel vehicles credit. And Europe, if you've been there, if you've rented a car, even if you were driven around, you notice most of the cars were diesel because, in fact, a lot of the gases that are emitted by the vehicles, it's better if it's diesel. It washes down more quickly out of the atmosphere, but they're worried about the nitrous oxide and some other things that can cause problems for some people. So, hey, I get that. So hydrogen methane technology that is being used right now in the new diesels has made a huge, huge difference. So if you look at this a little bit closer here, I'm going to pull this article right up on the desk. There you go. So now you can see it on YouTube, on craigpeterson.com/YouTube. It's touted as a zero-emission vehicle. Now we're talking about the Tesla Model 3, but in actuality, it creates more carbon dioxide, dumps more into the air than a comparable diesel-powered car. And I love this article. When the CO2 emissions from the battery production is included, electric cars like Teslas are, in the best case, slightly higher. We're talking about CO2 emissions here. In the best case, Teslas have slightly higher emissions of CO2 than a diesel engine and are otherwise much higher. And this is from a German think tank. It's just absolutely fascinating here. Daily Caller article that we're quoting from. And I love this picture they have of the Model 3 in the car show there in Toronto. So they looked at electric car production in Germany. It's heavily reliant on coal power. And the U.S., of course, we burn coal, we burn wood, we have things that the left really hates, like, heaven forbid, we have nuclear power, which is, of course, frankly, the cleanest of all. And if the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would get off of their hands and use some of this new nuclear technology that was invented here 30 years ago, we would be in incredible shape. There'd be almost no nuclear waste at all because we can reburn it in certain types of reactors and things, but people just got completely scared about it. California is requiring automakers to cut greenhouse gas emissions in cars, producing lower emission vehicles, buying credits, which is making people like Al Gore very rich, right? At the federal level, the U.S. government's giving you a $7,500 per electric vehicle tax break. It just goes on and on. A study here from the University of Cologne talking about what they found in responsible energy, which forget about it, right? And who wants responsible energy policies? It's just not out there right now. But a study released 2018 also found that driving electric cars might come with higher emissions than diesel vehicles, largely because of the lithium-ion production. For those that aren't aware, this lithium, most of it's harvested in Quebec. NASA uses the area for miles, hundreds of square miles around the lithium battery mine, if you will. NASA uses it for testing lunar landings, because there is no life at all. And then that is shipped off over to China for pre-processing, shipped to Japan to turn it into a type of a foam. It's shipped back to China to finalize the battery component, shipped back to the US to be installed in the Tesla. Think about all of the carbon dioxide from that. A Manhattan Institute study from 2018 found that putting more electric cars on the road would likely increase emissions compared to internal combustion engine vehicles. Now, you know that I have a libertarian bend. So part of my dislike of this whole thing is that, come on, people, bottom line, why should the government be the one that's deciding what the next best technology is going to be? Does that make any sense to you? Really? Does it make any sense that the government should be deciding, hey, listen, we're going to bet your tax money on electric vehicles rather than hydrogen fuel cells or some of these other technologies that might win? Again, let the private sector decide. And this is yet another area that our government has become socialist, with the government trying to control the means of production, the types of production. They're trying to incentivize it, et cetera, right? Stuff that I obviously just don't agree with. But I guess you guys already know that, right? Okay, so next up, let's see if I can make this work here for YouTube at craigpeterson.com/YouTube. I think it was this key combination. No, that didn't work. I'm doing something wrong. So what I'm going to do is this, because I'm pretty sure that will work. Yes, there you go. Okay, so now you can see the article. This is from the Daily Caller. This is former Senator Hasan from New Hampshire. You know who she is. One of her former aides now is in very, very much trouble. Now, we know the Democrats have been, I'm going to say it outward, because this is true. They have been stupid when it comes to their IT people. They have not hired, in most cases, the people they should have hired. And we got a listener out there, so hat tip to Guy, if you're listening, who has decided that because I keep talking about these problems with security, that he's going to take up a career in security. So he's signed up for the 6-month course, kind of getting started in cybersecurity. Once he's done with that, it'll take a year or so of him having real life experience in it, and then he'll be really quite good. But man alive here. They missed all kinds of red flags about what this guy was doing. But here's the bottom line. This is a plea agreement that he did sign, apparently. Extraordinary extensive data theft scheme is what it was called. He installed key logging devices that picked up every keystroke on these machines. So a key logger, in case you're not aware, if you're using a keyboard with a USB cable, and then that USB cable plugs into the back of your computer, someone can insert on the back of that computer one of these key loggers. And the way this key logger ends up working is that you're typing your keys, and they're all being intercepted by this little USB device. So you might want to right away, especially if you are a Democrat senator, apparently, you might want to right away go and check the back of your computer and see if your keyboard is plugged in directly. Now, if you watch for a while, I use Macs, right? So here's an example of the mouse I use. And on the Mac, it's Bluetooth wireless, but it also has available here a USB port, right? It's actually one of Apple's proprietary ports, and I have also the keyboard here. This is what I'm using on my iMac, in fact, to control the video that we're creating for YouTube on that iMac. So that's what that's all about right there, okay? And it's really nice, it's really handy. But what Apple does is everything is super encrypted. In fact, in order for me to configure this trackpad to my Mac, I have to plug it in via a cable. It does some handshaking. It automatically configures the iMac for this trackpad or this keyboard. The same thing's true for laptops if you're using external devices. So Apple has gone the extra mile. If you're using a regular Bluetooth keyboard, like here's on my other computer here, this is a standard older Mac keyboard and mouse. I have it in a mount, so it's all together. But this uses the regular Bluetooth, and regular Bluetooth has encryption as well. So typically, generally speaking, your Bluetooth is going to be safer than using a wired keyboard or wired mouse, because you can install these keyloggers, right? So that's kind of what I was getting at here. So back to our friend here at Senator Hasan's office. What she did is, or he did, I should say, is he installed these key loggers. So they usually have to come back to get that key logger in order to read it. But remember, if you're typing on your computer, what are you typing? Oh, a username and a password. And usually those are pretty well identifiable, pretty easily identifiable. So apparently Jackson Costco worked with an unnamed accomplice, another HASSAN employee, who reportedly lent him a key that he used to enter the office at night and who allegedly tried to destroy evidence for him after the fact. So Costco accepted responsibility for the events revealed by federal prosecutors in court last Friday. Apparently he was doing it from July to October, but he really did a lot more than that. It kind of goes on here in this article from the Daily Caller. He sneaked into her office reportedly multiple times at night, gathered dozens of gigabytes of data, including usernames and passwords belonging to Senate employees. Okay, like, really? Come on, guys. Tens of thousands of emails, internal documents, credit card information belonging to Senate employees, social security numbers, blah, blah, blah. So be careful out there. These IT people are not what they appear to be in many cases. And of course, the huge thing with the Democrats, and I couldn't believe how they responded when it was disclosed that Wasserman Schultz's IT people had just committed incredible crimes all the way across the board. And she was throwing a tantrum when they tried to investigate. In fact, I don't think the FBI ever got to fully investigate this thing. So anyhow, keep an eye on your IT people. Make sure you know who they are. Make sure they're of good character. It's easy enough to do a basic background check nowadays. You can get them done for $20, $30 online, just checking public record, and make sure they look okay. Okay? And it's difficult. I get it. It's difficult to hire the right person, because frankly, how do you know who the right person is? What do you know about IT? What do you know about security? It gets difficult. You got to find somebody that's been in a long time. All right, so next up, let's talk about this FBI problem here. This is from nextgov.com. I'll put it up on my screen here, craigpeterson.com/YouTube. Of course, you guys, the audio guys, listen to the podcast and here on iHeartRadio as well. You guys are my primary audience, okay? But if you want to see some of these articles, I put them up here on the screen. But this is huge. The FBI reportedly has ignored, for the most part, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office's concerns over its use of facial recognition technology in criminal investigations. It's new technology. It's kind of neat. They can scan all kinds of public cameras and photos, as well as records the FBI has to try and find suspects and close cases. That part's fine. But apparently what they've been doing is they're pulling from a database of more than 30 million mugshots and other photos. And while they're doing this, they're looking for matches, right? Doesn't that make sense? And they're trying to find the matches. They're trying to get the right people, but they get bad matches. They get mismatches with people who were nowhere in the area. Okay, I get that. You figure it out, right? And you take care of it. But apparently what they've been doing is they have been going after them and prosecuting and trying to get convictions. The auditors from the GAO recommended that the FBI tests the accuracy of these things at least once a year, make improvements, etc., etc. Very interesting. So if you're charged nowadays by the FBI or a local prosecutor, what's the right thing to do? Because you weren't in the area, you didn't do it. Are they going to convict you on bad evidence now because they trust the computers so much? I don't know. Okay, next up from the Tech Republic, we got an article about Wi-Fi. How many people complain about Wi-Fi, saying it's bad for our health? Well, another study out. And I've been saying this for a long time. And man, did I feel bad one time. I was keynoting at an annual event for a bank. And I was their keynote speaker for their annual shareholders meeting and talked about the future of technology, where it's going, what's happening. And a lady came up to me and said, so what do you think about radiation from phones, from cell phones? And I said, well, I've been an advanced class amateur radio operator for many, many decades. I have had a lot of radiation from these radios exposed to me. I've never had anything happen, and most of the studies that have been done about ham radio operators have said, hey, there's nothing definitive about a problem. So bottom line, it doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal that you have this happening. And then she said, you could see the tears welling up in her eyes. And she says, well, I think it was her husband had been diagnosed with cancer, and they said that it was because he had the phone up to his head all of the time, using it at work, and that work should be paying for all this medical treatment and pain and suffering and stuff. And man, that made me feel really bad. But the truth is there are no strong ties between these various types of radiation. And the biggest problem I think people have is the misunderstanding. We call it radiation, but this isn't X-rays. This isn't, the radiation you get from outer space. It is non-ionizing radiation. And radiation, from a scientific definition, is just energy moving through space. It's not a big deal. So these new Wi-Fi devices that are going to be rolled out all over the country for 5G, they're going to be everywhere. And that's one of the reasons you can get such high data rates. They are everywhere. And so you're going to be close to them. They're going to be mounted on houses, on telephone poles. They're going to be just everywhere. But the RF signals, these radio frequency signals that are generated by Wi-Fi, by Bluetooth, by your phones, in any device that's sold legally in the U.S., is tested. And, I'm not one for trusting government testing necessarily, right? But in reality, the safety limits are just incredible. You're talking about 500 milliwatts. And I have routinely been transmitting at 50 watts, which is a lot more power, and I haven't experienced any problems. And 100 watts on some of the HF bands and even higher. So studies, there was one at University of Barcelona looking at RF exposure of children ages 8 to 18 in Europe over a 3-day period. Wi-Fi represented 4% of total RF exposure. 62% of the RF exposure came from cellular base stations, 23% from broadcast TV and radio, and 10% from nearby cell phones. So the exposure is approximately 0.001% of that of the safety limits imposed by the European Commission, which is even tighter than here in the U.S. So back to this article, again, Tech Republic, and on craigpeterson.com, you'll see it. Wi-Fi is just not bad for your health. So we're going to whip through a couple more here pretty quickly because we only have a couple of minutes left. If you think that switching over to cloud services is going to make you safe, I'm afraid there's another thing coming for you. Because right now, cloud services are the Wild West. And various cloud services have various amounts of safety with them, if you will. They have really kind of an abysmal record. You think about all of these huge data breaches that have happened on the cloud recently, and it's incredible. Like 2 billion records found on the cloud from one of these cloud services providers just in the last couple of months. So just because you're using Office 365 or you're using some other type of cloud services, Salesforce.com, etc., does not mean it's safe. Now, I'm not saying that they aren't relatively safe, but there's a new study out, and this is from the Global Fish Report from Avanan, and they looked at 55 million emails sent to Microsoft Office 365 and Google G Suite accounts. Those are the two big guys. If you have email for your business, you're probably either with Office 365 or Google G Suite. And they found roughly 1% of all messages are phishing threats that use malicious attachments or links. And of those, 25% were marked safe by the Exchange Online Protection built into Office 365 and delivered to users. So just a little word of warning there. Just because you're using a cloud service does not mean that your emails are safe. I've got to bring this one up too. Amazon, they are burning books. And I don't know what to do about this. Remember Jeff Bezos said that he was going to be, open and they sell any books. He wanted the exchange of ideas, which is, of course, a very libertarian, classic liberal way of doing things. But now, apparently, he is removing books from the store. We know already that he has removed books from people's iPads, etc. So in February this year, they banned a number of books from white identitarian Jared Taylor, a book called The White Nationalist Manifesto by Greg Johnson. You may completely disagree with these guys, right? But again, they need to have their voices out there as part of the public debate. They also had bans on Holocaust revisionist books in 2017, a purge of all books by the controversial pickup blogger and author Darush Valadeza, I guess it is, many others. Amazon's refused, by the way, to take down a book defending pedophilia on First Amendment grounds. They have not removed certain books that are up there that are anti-Christian, even though there have been complaints about them. So they got to get their act together. And if you're using a mental health app, you can see it on my screen here, craigpeterson.com/YouTube. Be careful out there because of the data they're sharing. All right, have a great week. I am out of time. We will chat next week and, of course, during the week as well on my podcasts, craigpeterson.com/iTunes. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.